And so we are discussing, I'm teaching you the paper, Introduction to International Relations. And so far we have been discussing about the approaches to international relations. All right, so this is our fourth lecture, and we have covered so far the introduction part. Just to give you a quick recap, we have done the introduction part, which takes care of your early questions in the examination paper. And the first part, that is what is international relations, how it is different from international politics, and what is the relevance, what is the scope. And because international relations is a relatively very new field, so how it has come up, and what are the main concepts within it, national interest, national power, and all these concepts which regularly we hear and we read whenever you take up any book or any article on international relations. You would come across these words and these terms we had discussed in the very first few lectures. Then, because your syllabus is divided into the 3 modules, we started with the first one. The first module, or the first unit as you can call it, it's all about approaches to international relations. That's the theoretical part. Theory. ठीक है? International relations को समझने के लिए there have been different opinions, different perspectives, different schools of thought. तो इन डिफरेंट स्कूल्स ऑफ थॉट में कुछ इंपॉर्टेंट स्कूल्स हैं जिनको आपके सिलेबस में इनकॉर्पोरेट किया गया है. इट हैज बीन पुट inside your syllabus. So from when I explained the whole idea of approaches, I also told you that within international relations, it is situated periodically. All right, year wise, that's we say chronologically, these have been divided into different set of debates. All right, at one point of time, the first great debate, as they are called, at one point of time, realism and idealism and neo-realism, they were of more importance. Then later, subsequently, dependency school of thought emerged, systems or structural theories emerged. And now, then the fourth, it has gone up to 4 debates. All right, it started in with the first debate on realism, idealism, and now it has reached to the 4th great debate, which is all about the contemporary issues which grapple the world scenario right now. For example, environment. That's why we have a green politics, a school of thought which talks about more or less how to tackle environmental issues and climate change, carbon emission, carbon control, all those issues. So dedicated particularly, ecological approach to international relations, how the states ought to behave so that to protect the environment or to serve it better. Right. So anyway, these are such contemporary ones which forms the part of which forms the 4th debate. So first debate, we have been talking about idealism and realism and neo-realism. We have done realism and idealism, and now today we are going to do neo-realism, and second debate we are going to take up from the we are going to take up one theory in your syllabus which is called Wallstein on world systems theory. That we are going to finish today. So quickly on realism and idealism, those who have missed the previous lectures, realism and idealism. In fact, idealism came much before realism. Realism emerged as a reaction to idealist thinking in the international sphere or international politics. Idealism emerged with mainly in the international relations field with Woodrow Wilson, the US president. It emerged after the destruction had taken place World War I. Okay, so after World War I, there was a sudden realization amongst all the political thinkers, political leaders. At that point of time, because education was so limited, all the political leaders were the ones who were also involved in thinking. So it was not like a separate set of people who were political leaders, who were political thinkers and political scientists. More or less, everybody was dealing with the same kind of a situation. All right, so it was, though he was a political leader in his own times, but he was a great political thinker because he framed the whole structural idea behind this liberal theory called idealism, or liberalism as it is also called. So the whole idea of liberalism rests on two things. One is morality, naitikta, that every human being is a good human being. A, they all realize the fact that all human beings are good human beings. Their assumption is that. So if they are good, they would expect good from others and do good themselves, right? So in international relations also, if they use this kind of human nature angle, they realize that all the states are generally good states dealing with good people, and that's why they all want peace and cooperation at the end. So the end goal is peace. How to achieve that peace? Because they were writing in that period when World War I was taking place or had taken place, so they realized that war is not going to do good to anyone. So they were strictly against war, violence of any kind. It brings nothing but only destruction. So that's why their whole basic premise was the states should behave in a certain moral manner and maintain peace with each other, so they can coexist. They can coexist together and share the same space. But how is it possible? It is only possible through institutional mechanism. Since we don't have a single organization or single unit which can possibly take care of all the conflicts if they emerge between states. So Woodrow Wilson gave a 14-point program. Okay, when you will read your book, you will come to know within that 14-point program, the biggest contribution of idealist theory or liberal theory so far is that they talk about a world organization, world government, and that's how he proposed the idea of League of Nations. League of Nations, which came into force in 1920. Now, League of Nations is what? It's a predecessor to United Nations. So, right before, after World War I, they realized that it's very important to organize people and realize that all of us have same kind of goal, that is progress and development. And in order to progress, we cannot grow by killing each other. We can only grow together. And for that peaceful coexistence to happen, it's important that there has to be some laws, rules and regulations. Law of nations, that was called. International law, जिसको हम आजकल कहते हैं. So all those laws, and to organize this and to, they believe that some sort of structure is to be established. And that's why he proposed the League of Nations. There were 63 members in League of Nations at that time, but ironically, in fact, USA was not a member state. It never became a member of League of Nations. However, all newly independent states, emerging states, European states primarily, they became the members. So League of Nations was one thing, which was one major contribution. Another thing is that they talked about collective security. They also talked about collective security so that no state feels threatened to each other. If at all a small state feels threatened from a very strong or a large or big state, then they can approach this League of Nations and seek help and sort it out, the problem. So idea of collective security was providing some sort of solace to everyone, that nobody is weak or strong or big or small. Everybody can coexist. All right. Third thing is, most important thing is that within that 14-point program, Wilson also talks about right to self-determination. He realized that there are very small states also. All right. So how to protect these states? There are minorities, those who do not share culture with big countries. Har ek country mein there are some set of people who belong to a different kind of culture, ethnicity, race, language, and how to protect them, or how to rather provide them with a sense of security. So that right to self-determination was very much a part of his program, that voice of minorities should not go unheard. For that reason, even if there is a smallest state, it should be welcome to put out its opinion in the world stage. They were encouraged. So this is more or less, idealism is all about all good things. They want peace, they want pluralism, they want coexistence, they want to stay together and develop. They believed in reason, that everybody has to be reasoned out. Don't be, extremist or fundamentalist. Then science, they talked about progress, development, right? And there was a considerable stress on education. This was idealism till World War II. But then World War II happened. It happened. So the idealist also realized, and rest of the people who were, kind of uh, leaning towards idealism, everybody realized, World War II happened, League of Nations failed. So League of Nations could not save or could not prevent World War II. So in turn, people realized that this theory is not going to take us far, because European nations were still very ambitious. Their whole idea of expansionism was never stopped. It never ceased to exist. Everybody, all the countries had some expansionist ideas. They were ambitious, right? That's how colonialism happens. So they believed in that and they wanted to expand, they wanted to experience power, they wanted to remain powerful, and that's why World War II happened. So after World War II, there was a growing realization that these ideals are good to hear, they are very good, but then to realize them, it's very difficult at an international level. All right. So in reaction to this, realism emerged. So realist thinking, starting with E.H. Carr, it emerged after realizing that idealist theory, it's called ideal because it's something which is very perfect, nearly perfect. So this kind of theory or liberal ideas probably does not provide us with the reality. It does not present the clear and real picture of the world. That's how realist thinking emerged. And now what about realism? And realism had a very clear idea, stark opposite to idealism. It believed that there is hierarchy in the world. There are strong nations, there are weak nations, there is big, there is small, all right? So, or if they all have to exist, it cannot be peaceful at all times. So the relation between the states, they realized, is always conflictual. There are eternal conflicts between one or the other state, right? Second important things about realism is their emphasis on state. They overemphasized and had a lot of faith on the nature of state. अब nature of state क्या है उनके लिए? State is ambitious, just like taking a cue from the Hobbesian individualism. They thought for them, human beings are always selfish, human beings are always competitive, human beings are always power centric, and that's how state behaves. State is power centric, state is selfish, state will always protect its interest first. So in that sense, the most important idea which emerges is the idea of power, which is very, very important to realist thinking. They realize that constantly there is a struggle for power. That's the central point of, within the relationships or interaction between the states. So there is a constant struggle for power. Everybody wants to become powerful. In order to develop, in order to grow, you have to supersede certain states. And that is the reason why we have continuous conflicts between states. They justify. Not that they say that these conflicts can be resolved through violence. It's not that. They don't say that. They don't say violence is the answer. But they say clever thinking and good foreign policy perhaps could be the answer. So they don't really sign up for any kind of organization or world government as such, because they say it's not possible. All the countries have their own goals, they have their own ambitions. So it's not possible to have one single kind of, thinking and one world government, one set of laws, because everybody is quite plural in their ideas. So what is possible is that you work on your statecraft, because we don't know what is happening inside the other state's boundary. So it is not possible, humanly not possible. That's why they don't really side with different institutions or different kind of setup. They believe that one state should have it should protect its interest, which is national interest. Okay, irrespective of whatever is happening, national interest is first and foremost, and states' ultimate goal is to protect its national interest, even if it has to go into war to justify its national interest or protect its citizens, it can go. It's like that. Okay, so this was realism, realist thinking, exactly opposite to idealism. This is what we have done till yesterday. And then we talked about how realist school emerged, E.H. Carr, Hans Morgenthau, and Kenneth Waltz. These are most important names within that realist school of thought. Then we talked about the evolution. You can see my screen here. Evolution. How, what are the sources the realist school of thought, takes from. It has taken from philosopher Thucydides's work, Kautilya's work, Arthashastra, Niccolo Machiavelli's work, which is The Prince, and most importantly, Thomas Hobbes. ये नाम आपने पहले भी political theory में सुना होगा. And Thomas Hobbes' work, and especially the idea of human nature. Okay, they completely, and that human nature for them is the nature of the state. Okay, so that's how their sources and how they emerged in reaction to idealism at that point of time, especially E.H. Carr. He was the first person, and his book, as you can see here, The 20 Years Crisis. This book was the foundation in international politics, and it basically established realist thinking. It was the beginning of the realist school of thought. Okay, so now here again the same thing I've mentioned, how it went against liberalism. The League of Nations failed, and Carr realized that there has to be a better understanding of the world. It is not rosy picture as painted by the liberals, but rather strictly the nations or the states at that point of time were very ambitious, and they wanted control, and that control could only come from superb foreign policies. Statecraft is something which they would want everybody to work on their own statecraft. Okay, so what are the basic points, basic principles of classical realism? Sorry, let's just quickly see. One is that international politics is power politics. As I explained, the central point of realist thinking is struggle for power. That everything, whatever international politics is, that is, or power politics, everybody is just struggling for power. Second is state egoism and conflict, which is all about that state has a certain ego, it behaves in a certain manner because state is eternally selfish and had an expansionist motive at times. And the idea is that the state has to protect its citizens at any cost. So that's the nature, and that's why they will always be in conflict with each other. Okay, so that this is where you can compare the state's nature with the human nature as proposed by Hobbes. So Hobbes' description of human nature, state of nature, is what exactly the realist thinkers take, and they substitute the human nature to state nature. Okay. Third one means a rational statecraft serves national interest. So realist school put a lot of emphasis on statecraft, how to build a certain, in an organized manner, how to go ahead, the art of statecraft. This Machiavelli also extensively talk about. Kautilya in his Arthashastra is also talking about how, because you don't know what the opponent is planning, so how you will move in a certain manner where it protects your own interest, yet it doesn't offend anyone else, any enemy. Okay, so that kind of idea, statecraft, is one thing which is also very important. And in this respect, Hans Morgenthau's 6 principles of political realism is very, very important. Everyone has to write it in their answers when you're talking about realism. You cannot miss out on these 6 points. So it can be a short note as well. 6 principles of political realism by Hans Morgenthau. Hans Morgenthau is a very important name. Okay. And fourth point is serving national interest is political morality. As I said, national interest is supreme interest of everything else. Okay. So that is the idea. So everything else can wait, but not national interest. Then fifth point being the power politics does not mean endless conflict and war. This is also one thing I said, that realists do not really want to go for war every time. It's not like the idea is to propose war for the answer for everything. They have there at times there are instances where the realists have also stood against wars, or they have been vocal about how to prevent war and not to go on wars, etc., etc. So if things can be sorted without going into war and mass destruction, then that is preferable by the realists. However, if at all it's a survival question, then they don't mind going into war at all. Okay. All right. These are the assumptions that state are the primary actors in the international system. Okay. International relation is anarchic in nature, that there is chaos, lawlessness everywhere, and that is the reason, because we don't have laws, international laws, because we don't have central authority, the realists say that is the reason that states have to be very cautious. They have to move according to the cost benefit analysis. Okay, they have to do those calculations in order to protect itself. Okay. Third one is control over material resources. Why the states behave in this manner? Because everyone wants to have certain control over material resources which are present in the world. And those material resources, mind you, are limited. They are not abundant. Okay. If they are limited, which means that everybody has to fight over it. So that struggle for power of gaining control over these material resources is primarily important, and that's why justifies the state's behavior. Okay. So then we discussed at length, we have discussed all these points, and now we are going to come to neo-realism. Quickly we'll take a look, then we'll do the world systems theory. Okay, neo-realism. Realism gave way because realism suffered through limitations. All theories so far does. All the theories have some scope for improvement. Every time a theory emerges, there are its limitations and criticisms as well. So within the realist group, it's not from outside, but within the realist group, there was certain realization that certain changes or modifications are required. And that's how neo-realism emerged. Let's just see what is written here. So new ideas emerged in the 1970s. Some of them were critical of classical realist assumptions. Together, these ideas came to be described as neo-realism, or in some books and somewhere you can also see structural realism, because they started talking about structures. Kenneth Waltz, as I told you earlier also, it's a very important name apart from, Hans Margando and E.H. Carr. So Kenneth Waltz wrote his book, the book name is Theory of International Politics, in 1979. So neo-realism is relatively a very new approach. Okay. And he used the expression structural realism in his book. Waltz said that theories of international politics could be developed at 3 levels of analysis. And what are these levels? One is at an individual level, one is at the state level, and one is at the international system. So individual, state, and the international system. These are the 3 levels of analysis for neo-realist thinkers. Now, why neo-realism emerged? Let's just see. Next paragraph. The major defect of classical realism is that it is not able to explain behavior at a level above the state. As I told you earlier also, classical realism, for everything, it is centered around state only, right? So they don't go to non-state actors. They don't talk about any other sphere of influence like economy or culture or social. They don't talk about anything but state. Okay. So classical realism explains international politics in terms of the nature and action of state only. In other words, egoism and national interest are at the core of classical realism. That now we know. So Waltz takes a step forward. he explains the behavior of the state in terms of the structure of international system. In other words, while classical realism explains international politics in terms of the inside, neorealism does it in terms of the outside. In shifting attention from the state to the international system, neorealism places an emphasis on the implications of anarchy. Now, this is important because see, there is state and this is international arena, world stage. So what realists are doing is they are talking, standing on this side of the boundary where everything is state perspective. State is protecting itself, state has national interests, state is ambitious, state is selfish, state is egoistic, state. Okay. Now, neo-realists, they realize that state is not everything, but the bigger role is played by the whole international. And in order to understand why state should behave in this manner or to justify that state must be, a little bit controlling or, there are conflicts around it, so it has to protect itself. They study the international system in whole. They explain the behavior. That's why he's using the term that the attention is shifted from inside to outside. So ये इधर से आ रहे हैं and the neorealists are coming from this side. Neorealists are also justifying that there is conflict, there is a struggle of power, but they are saying looking at the whole system, whereas classical realists are only looking at the state and its behavior. All right. So like they say that neorealism places an emphasis on the implications of anarchy. They say why the state is behaving in the manner because there is lawlessness, arajakta, anarchy, okay, lawlessness, chaos in the international system. That's why state have to be cautious and guard themselves, right? So the characteristics of international life stem from the fact that states or any other international actor operates within a domain which has no formal or central authority. Okay, so the first point of realization for the neorealist is there is no central authority. Okay, but how does this shape the behavior of the state? Even if there is no central authority, they could have behaved in a better manner. The idealist will ask why they are not talking about coexistence or peace, and why, according to neorealist, does international anarchy tend towards conflict rather than cooperation? Just what I said. Why is it so that this international anarchy, which they are saying that there is no central authority, and that's why state have to behave on their own. So why they can't behave in a cooperative manner? So let's see why Waltz is saying that they cannot be cooperative, but rather there is conflict. Waltz draws from the system theories. As I explained in my first lecture when we were doing a little bit on approaches, I said there is a system theory. How much he draws from the system theories and puts it into the realist approach, we'll see. He argues that systems are composed of a structure and they are interacting in it. एक system में क्या होता है? There are different units. They interact with each other, work in coordination, and then there is a system. Okay, just like we have, different kinds of systems, like the cars have a system, the vehicles have a system. Also, we gave an example, solar system. So they have different units. They work together and they have their own set of role to play, and that's a system. So political structures have three elements. How does political structure, he's explaining that system, how does it work? So political structure have three elements: an ordering principle that is anarchic because there is no law. The character of the units, okay, one is the ordering principle, which is center. Then there is character of units, which is functionally alike or differentiated. They may be together, they may not be, they will function in isolation or they work together. It can be anything. And the distribution of capabilities. Okay, distribution of capabilities means everybody has a certain capacity. And that's why within a class also you can realize सब लोग first नहीं आते हैं. Everybody has a सब लोग स्पोर्ट्स में बेहतर नहीं होते हैं. जो स्पोर्ट्स में बेहतर होता है, sometimes they don't do academically well. Sometimes they may have some other talent. So everybody has different set of capabilities. The distribution of capabilities is sometimes uneven. Okay, so Waltz argues that two elements of the structure of the international system are constant. The lack of an overarching authority means that its ordering principle is anarchy. So he's saying that nothing can differ because there is anarchy. ये तो assumption है उनका, that there is anarchy all over. So first element is constant, it doesn't change. Second, the principle of self-help means that all of the units remain functionally alike. Like all the states have similar goal, they want to achieve best for their state, they want their state to remain powerful, etc., etc. So these two elements are constant. What about the third? Let's see. Accordingly, the one structural variable is the distribution of capabilities, with the main distinction falling between bipolar and multipolar systems. So bipolar, multipolar क्या होता है? Which means bipolar means when the world is polarized and divided into two blocks. Bi means two. So unipolar means one, bipolar means two, and multipolar means different, blocks. So bipolar and multipolar systems में the main distinction is that there is a distribution of capabilities. Okay, so in other words, in the anarchic world system, where all the states are security conscious, अब समझो कि एक anarchic system है, it's a lawless authority, but हर state की अपनी महत्वाकांक्षाएं हैं, इच्छाएं हैं, and there is a need to grow. They are all very security conscious because they feel threatened. Power differential between states become crucial. Now, power becomes the only criterion which makes them different. Power or capabilities. Capabilities makes you powerful. So this becomes very, very crucial. So some states have more capabilities than others, and that is what shapes the world politics. All right, so neo-realist theory explains the international system and then explains why states behave in such a manner, because it's a struggle for power since there is anarchy and since all the capabilities are differently placed. All the units have those same goals, but they are different capabilities. Okay, let's see the important principles. First is anarchy is the organizing principle of the international system. This is the first assumption. वो मान के ही चलते हैं. Let's see. The basic difference between classical realism and neo-realism is their contrasting views on states' role in politics. Morgenthau's classical realism relied on the assumption that leaders of states are motivated by their lust for power. Leaders are motivated from inside. The states have a instinct to grow and to be powerful. Walt's theory, by contrast, omits leaders' motivation. Says that's not important. State characteristics are casual variables. Everybody behaves in the same, except for the minimal assumption that state seeks to survive. That's the basic idea. वो motivation कितना भी deep हो, but the whole idea is that all the states, have this kind of motivation and there is an instinct to survive. In other words, Waltz ignores two assumptions important in classical realism, namely egoism of the state and power aggrandizement by the state. Instead, he considers the third assumption, namely the anarchy in the international system, most important. He wants to identify the persistent effects of the international system. 2 points bear significance. क्या points है? First, states or the units in the anarchic international system are interconnected. As I said, no state can grow in isolation. So they are interconnected. They have to work together with each other. Change in some unit or change in their mutual relations produces change in the other parts of the international. It's like that, when we are experiencing some kind of economic change, it is bound to influence other countries as well. Secondly, international system is not the sum total of its parts. Rather, international system exhibits properties and behaviors that are different from those of the parts because systems are generative. The international political system is characterized by complex, non-linear relationships and unintended consequences. Everything is unpredictable. You can never predict what's going to happen next. All right. So outcomes are generally influenced by something more than simply the aggregation of individual states. Okay. So behaviors with a tendency towards unintended and ironic outcomes. As a result, what happens? There is a gap between what state want and what the state gets. Naturally, because everything around it is unpredictable. Consequently, unlike classical realists, neo-realists see international politics as tragic rather than being driven by aggressive behavior of revisionist states. To put it in simple words, for neo-realists, international system from outside and above impacts and shapes the behavior of the state. Realists are saying that the behavior of the states shapes the international system. They are saying the nature of international system impacts and shapes the behavior of the state. That's the difference. In other words, the institutions and norms that inform the international system endow it with autonomy and as if with a purpose of its own, right? So what are the implications of international anarchy? क्या होता है international anarchy अगर हो? Then what will happen? क्या कहते हैं neo-realists? Let's see. Neo-realists argue that international anarchy necessarily tends towards tension, conflict, and the unavoidable possibility of war for three main reasons. In the first place, as states are separate, autonomous, and formally equal political units, they must ultimately rely on their own resources to realize their interest. So international anarchy therefore results in a system of self-help because states cannot count on anyone else to take care of them. That's why international anarchy results in self-help situation where states have to rely on their own. Second, relationships between and among the states are always characterized by uncertainty and suspicion. As I said, you never know what the opponent is planning. So this is best explained through the security dilemma. Okay, all the self-help force states to ensure security and their survival by building up sufficient military capability to deter other states from attacking them. Such actions are always liable to be interpreted as hostile or aggressive by other states. Uncertainty about the motives of other states therefore forces the states to treat all other states as enemies, meaning that permanent insecurity is the inescapable consequence of living in conditions of anarchy. So second thing, what happens when you are in anarchy? You are always insecure, you feel threatened, you're never secured. Third, what happens is that conflict is also encouraged by the fact that states are primarily concerned about maintaining or improving their position relative to other states. That is with making relative gains. So everybody is concerned about making progress and their own gains. They're not talking about anything else. So apart from anything else, this discourages cooperation and reduces the effectiveness of international organization. Because although all states may benefit from a particular action or policy, each state is actually more worried about whether the other states will benefit more. इस policy से उनको ज़्यादा फायदा तो नहीं हो रहा. That's what goes into thinking then. So although such neo-realist thinking had a profound impact both within and beyond realist tradition, since the 1990s, realist theories have often attempted to fuse other theories and assumptions, giving rise to what has been called neo-realist or post-neo-realism, a subcategory within the realism. Okay, so this is all about anarchy. Anarchy kya karta hai? What are the implications? Second is security dilemma, most important thing which the neo-realists talk about. So what is security dilemma? Neo-realism or structural realism reaches many of the same conclusions as classical realism because they are basically realist theories. However, it does so by looking at systematic rather than individual and state level causes that we know now. This means that it focuses less on human nature and more on anarchic structure of the international system in which it operates. Whereas classical realism places responsibility for war at the feet of selfish and narrow-minded individual desires or human beings. But Waltz points out to the anarchical structure of the international system as the main reason for war. He asserts that states are victims of the security dilemma. As I said, they feel threatened, in which effort of a state is to ensure its survival. It threatens the security of others. Okay, Following realism's concept of self-help, Walsh argues that the only rational course of action for a state in a lawlessness or chaotic or anarchic international system is to maintain enough military and political power so that it can defend itself against aggression. In doing so, it might invest in new weapons or seek alliances with other states that may or may not come to its aid in crisis. Unfortunately, these steps towards self-defense appear threatening to other neighboring states, forcing them to respond with their own military build-up and alliance making. This is what we see, in the world today. If one country A is going for nuclear, strengthening exercise, then you will see that country B, country C, country D, all of them feel threatened, and they also start working on the same technology so that they can be self-sufficient. So that insecurity is totally security dilemma, as it is called, is there. We can see it in the states. So it forces them to respond with their own military build-up and alliance making. They do. Okay, so in a world defined by mutual suspicion, one state's attempts to safeguard its survival or make other states less secure, forcing them to respond with their own self-help strategies. That is what the neorealist think security dilemma is. The result is arms race. There is a continuous arms race in which every state builds up its military capability in response to others' actions. This is the crux of security dilemma. Neorealists use it to explain the persistence of conflict and war on the international stage. Why there is a constant war and conflicting situation. In the absence of a world government, states are condemned to exist in an environment of mutual distrust. क्योंकि world government नहीं है. And one state's declaration that it is seeking armed strength for purely defensive reason is certain to be met with suspicion by its neighbor. कोई भी हमारा neighbor अगर हमें कहता है कि oh, we are just developing this technology for ourselves, we are not going to use it on you, but no other state would buy that argument. Everybody will be threatened and they'll say, okay, then we can also do that, we should be prepared. So balance of power, alliance system, arms race, they are basically the few strategic tools of the states which states use for its own survival. Balance of power, alliance system, they make friends. You should always have a friendly neighborly relations. We don't enjoy that though. Anyway, so arms race. There is a constant arms race and development going on, military actions, right? So security dilemma is all about suspicion, mutual suspicion. Then third one, coming back to balance of power, it talks about balance of power, polarity and stability. Now what is balance of power, polarity and stability? Let's take a quick look. The fact that states are inclined to treat other states as enemies does not inevitably lead to bloodshed and open violence. Not necessarily that everybody wants to go into war. Rather, neorealists, in common with classical realists, believe that conflict can be contained by the balance of power, a key concept for all types of realists. However, while classical realists treat the balance of power as a product of prudent statecraft, your foreign policy should reflect that balance of power. Neorealists see it as a consequence of the structural dynamics of the international system. They see it as a necessity, and specifically of the distribution of power between the and among the states. The principal factor affecting the likelihood of a balance of power and therefore the prospect of war or peace is the number of great powers operating within the international system. Okay, although neorealists believe ये balance of power कैसे maintain करें, अब हम उस पे बात कर रहे हैं. Although neorealists believe that there is a general bias in the international system in favor of balance rather than imbalance. World order is determined by the changing fate of great powers. Of course, we understand, and realists also understand, that there is a hierarchy. Some states are great powers or powerful and some are weak. So, and this whole hierarchy is reflected in the emphasis on polarity. Polarize kar do world ko. Power polarity indicates the level of stability or lack of it. And polarity could be anything, unipolar, bipolar or multipolar. its various permutation and combination also. Okay, so Waltz and neorealists have generally associated bipolar systems with stability, where you have two great powers and they are competing with you, rather than having one like unipolar system or multipolar system. They choose bipolar system as the best one. It brings more stability. And why? They say that the multipolar systems will be less stable. कभी इधर जाएंगे कभी उधर जाएंगे, rather than having two means more stability. So this had inclined Waltz and other neorealists to view Cold War bipolarity. Cold War क्या था? Cold War was the period where US and the USSR, there were two poles. That was a bipolar structure or bipolar era where there were two blocks in the world. There was USA on the one side and USSR on the other side. Okay, so neorealists view Cold War bipolarity in very positively. They think that this is going to give a long time peace to everyone in the world. Okay, so multipolarity could bring instability. Having various pockets are not something which they are very comfortable with. So multipolarism is not the answer. Unipolarism is not possible and it should not be when they are writing. And of course, then bipolarity is something which they agree with. Okay, so neorealists disagree among themselves about the relationship between structural instability and the likelihood of war. The offensive realists believe that instability of a multipolar system could lead to conflict and war. War can happen if you have various pockets, they would all struggle within themselves and then there will be war. Whereas the defensive realists maintain that since states tend to prioritize security over power, they are more conscious about their security rather than a struggle of power, they would generally be reluctant to go for war, regardless of the dynamics. So bipolar system for neorealist tends towards more stability and strengthen the likelihood of peace. Why? There are two main reasons Waltz gives us. First, the existence of only two great powers encourage each to maintain the bipolar system. In the process, they are maintaining themselves. Fewer great powers means the possibilities of great wars are reduced. The existence of only two great powers reduces the chances of miscalculation and makes it easier to operate an effective system of deterrence. Power relationships are more stable as each bloc is forced to rely on inner resources, that is economic and military, whereas external, that is friends with one, alliances of the other state, expanding power is not available. So you tend to be contented and satisfied with what you have. So you have to, and you maintain peace and go ahead. Okay. Second reason why they prefer bipolarity over different multipolar, power distribution. Multipolar system tends to be inherently unstable. क्यों? क्योंकि a large number of great powers increases the number of possible great power conflicts. In a class, if we have 2 genius or 3 genius or 4 genius, then you will have some closer set of opinions. But you have a class which is full of geniuses is likely to have more conflicts. Okay, so multipolarity creates a bias in favor of fluidity and perhaps instability because everybody then wants to become powerful. It leads to shifting alliances as great powers have external means of extending. कोई military में powerful हो गया, people will ally with that. Then कोई economically powerful हो गया, people will. So instability. Power is more decentralized, it's divided in a multipolar system. Existing great powers may be more restless and ambitious, while weak states may be able to form alliances in order to challenge and displace great powers. Then there is a possibility great powers will be displaced. So hierarchy is possible, feels threatened. So the international political outcomes that Waltz predicts include multipolar systems will be less stable than bipolar systems. Interdependence will be lower in bipolarity than multipolarity. And that regardless of unit behavior, Hegemony by any single state is unlikely or even impossible. ये उनका basic idea है. However, criticism would say that having multipolar means there are chances given to other powers also. Power sharing is opened. It's not controlled by one country. It's open so that everybody gets a chance to grow. Multipolar gives a chance to grow, but bipolar or a unipolar system is by far very controlling. So you will have to choose and remain subservient to the system always. Anyway, let's look closely at the criticism of realism. So realist approach puts an overemphasis on the power-centric configuration that we have clearly seen. Realism stretches the power-seeking tendency of the states to the extent that it makes occurrence of conflict and war inevitable. They say, hona hi hona hai. War is inevitable. As power seekers, states are aggressive in their external conduct because states are insecure, right? This approach denies that states are capable of cooperation and mutual help. Okay, so whereas the new perspective sees states both as aggressive and cooperative, the classical realists never saw cooperation as an answer. But neo-realists realized that, okay, maybe when they are experiencing some kind of power, it's possible that they will cooperate and form alliance with each other to maintain peace. Secondly, realism's assumption of international relations as anarchic negates the possibility that there could be a transnational institutional arrangement for cooperation and even enforcement of international decisions. It could call the other world visions as utopias, but the very existence of United Nations since 1945 and its deterrent role in preventing another world war did not qualify the political condition of anarchy exactly as realism. Realism said there is anarchy, right? International system is lawlessness. But 1945 se aaj tak United Nations as a alternate form of world government has been challenging all the threats, is able to keep away the possibility of war. So this whole idea of realist that ho hi nahi sakta cooperation, ho hi nahi sakta world government is completely negated. All right. So of course, the United Nations is not synonymous to a world government, but definitely it represents the global aspiration for peace and cooperation. The fact that realist or neo-realist said ki peace or cooperation ho hi nahi sakta because nobody wants it, it's negated because all the states rather they want peace and cooperation and progress. Okay, this is realized. So it provides for collective security. Going back to the idealist ideals, that collective security is not something which has vanished or ceased to exist. Everybody believe in collective security and entrust the Security Council to authorize use of force. Under Chapter 7, which then is left for member states to implement, that's another question, but the whole idea of collective security is still very, very relevant. Thirdly, realism is often criticized for treating state as a sole actor. They don't, even in the context of post-Cold War situation, which is even today, political environment where the actors have become pluralized with blurred boundaries of participation, realism's state as the sole wielder of power is heavily challenged. To defend itself from the damages of these criticisms, realism tried to reformulate its theoretical proposition in the light of changing political circumstances. Some realist reformulations, for example, took place in the light of idealist and liberal explanations of world politics in the later's explanation. Okay, such attempts to reformulate realism, नए तरीके से realism को रखने की जब बात हुई इन सारे criticisms के चलते, so we have some new paradigms. Jeffrey Legro and Andrew Moravix, they observed that the realist paradigm was degenerating and its conceptual foundations were being stretched beyond recognition. So as realism had stretched its conceptual boundaries or to other theoretical approaches, Legro and Moravix thus ask, is everybody now a realist? Because somewhere there is a thing that, all of them are getting amalgamated. Okay, so there is a observation from Thomas Walker and Jeffrey Morton. They observe that with the end of Cold War, the expansion of democracy has happened and the increasing importance of global trade and international organizations have emerged. The world is no longer neatly suited to realist concern, which means state is not the only actor, other actors and players are also there. So in effect, research in international relations is no longer bound by one paradigmatic vision of global politics. Evidence shows a field with a plurality of theoretical concerns. So the realists either have to change their account, modify it a little, or else the other seemingly visions have taken over. So there is a quick evaluation, how the liberals have fared and what is the current status, and then we'll move on to the systems approach. Okay, I'm going to read the evaluation for you right now. In the 1980s, theory of international politics came under scholarly criticism. As time went by, subcategories in non-realism, in particular the neoliberal institutionalism and writings on democratic peace, became more popular. Realism's decline in the 1990s was amplified by international events. The closing years of the 20th century seemed to provide strong support to alternative approaches. The disintegration of Soviet Union, formation of European, these are some of the events which led to the uh, decline of realist thinkers and their thought process. And what are these developments? The disintegration of Soviet Union. So bipolarity end ho gaya. One bloc collapsed completely. So struggle of power. Suddenly the world is becoming unipolar, or let's say now multipolar. So their one theory is proven wrong already. So formation of the European Union and economic integration in Southeast Asian and other regions. So regionalistic, organizations have come up, which means multipolarity emerges. The wave of democratization and economic liberalization throughout the former Soviet Union, Eastern Europe, Latin America, and other parts of developing world, which means that countries are getting democratized, gaining independence, and economic liberalization. Everything has its own impact, and it is decentralizing power. There is less concentration of power, and power is being circulated, and it is shared by many other spheres of influence, by many other spheres other than political, and also other organizations and non-state actors. So fourth is the improbability of war between the great powers, all made realism, both classical and neo, and their various stands seem outdated. That war is not the only thing which states are seeking nowadays. Now it appeared that liberal or constructivist theories could better appreciate and explain the changes which are taking place in the international arena. But realism staged a sort of comeback after the terrorist events of 2001, September 11, 9/11 in the United States. Again, security of the state once again became the topmost concern in international relations. Not surprisingly, the post 9/11 realism is regarded as being better suited to address threats to national security. Once again, there is a realization that security or national interest, national security is the foremost concern, and not all states want peace in this community, and in an international arena, one has to be prepared. So it is, however, ironic that its renaissance is at least partly owed to transnational terrorist networks motivated by religious extremism, non-state actors, which realism had never taken into account. Because realists always thought action would come only from the states, the main actors, but these are non-state actors. The organizations like terrorist organizations and other extremist organizations, those who force them to realize that security is most important for any state. So in the post-Cold War years, international arena has assumed a new form. Nation states are being threatened by divisive and secessionist movements. A lot of changes are coming, no? Many of the conflicts have assumed deadly proportions. According to John Stremmen law, prevention has become a buzzword among diplomats seeking to stem anarchy in the Africa, the Balkans, the new states of former Soviet Union, everywhere. 1992, for example, out of 30 conflicts across the world, as many as 29 were military actions taking place inside the states. One can refer to such examples like, from within the state. So ethnic conflicts, Yugoslavia, insurgency within Afghanistan, conflicts in Iraq, regarding Kurds, in Somalia, conflicts in Sri Lanka, MQM, related conflicts in Pakistan, and of course, Indian states, Jammu and Kashmir and Punjab. The ongoing military or paramilitary actions can be seen within these nation states. So, in the post Cold War conflicts, 90% of the casualties have been of civilians, not of the soldiers. Thus, neorealism stressed the struggle for power not only between states but also intra-state struggles in an anarchic world. So, intra-state struggles are more important right now and they are more decisive rather than interstate. Okay, so it will not be out of place here to mention that at a socio-political level, domestic determination of foreign policy options are not as important consideration with the realist who preferred states to remain confined to diplomatic, military and strategic sources of power. So in post-Cold War period, till today, realists believe that peace was made possible in the world during the Cold War period owing to bipolarity, stable bipolarity, balance of terror, and a belief that nuclear war could be suicidal. With the end of the Cold War, the realist hope for lasting peace to result out of the rules of conduct to be enforced by the United States, which has virtually monopoly of powers, unipolar world. Now, realism today recognizes the role of United Nations, IMF, WTO, yet they are still considered to be subordinate to the wishes of powerful states. They only work under the pressure and under the advices and under the governance of some states, powerful states. Thus, realist or neo-realist also, they still believe in promotion of national interest as expressed through state power. Despite international organizations, regimes, and non-state actors, power continues to dominate international relations, and the realists still maintain that. One interesting fact to note is that realism and neo-realistic approaches are mostly confined to studies in USA and Europe. Both stress on state power systems and interstate relations. Yeah, the focus of the study has always been westernized nations. An important difference between the two is, however, one of degree and focus. Neorealism in international relations differs from realism by virtue of its lesser concern with the diplomatic, military, and strategic sources which maintain or disturb the balance of power, and more preoccupation with the political and economic concerns which need to be addressed by for a sustainable international system. Most of the neorealists, therefore, have been students of international political economy, those who prefer to go beyond political structure. International studies began focusing on the developing countries after neorealistic approach came to vogue. After many long years in the 80s and 90s, they started going beyond Europe, looking beyond Europe and US. They are more concerned with issues of dependence and development as against a state-centered approach. When we do the dependency, we will also talk about this, that how the approaches which talk about hegemonic stability of or uneven distribution of power with one or few states holding power or controlling it. So behavioralists, there's a comment as behavioralists like Professor James Rossno often complain that concerned third world students of internationals often tend to be attracted to dependency theory, which is they have been talking about third world countries have been historically exploited by the rich nations or developed West. This is the basic notion of dependency, which we are going to take up in the next segment. Okay, this completes your discussion on realism, idealism, neorealism, institutionalism, liberalism. Okay, so now if you can see my screen, we are going to talk about a world systems theory. I think we still have 10 minutes and we can discuss the world system theory, which is the next important theory in your syllabus. Now, these are world system theory, and the most important within the world system theory, there are many names. However, we are going to talk about Immanuel Wallstein. Immanuel Wallstein, it's a very important name, and this within the systems theory, general systems theory as they are called, world systems theory is given by Immanuel Wallstein, which forms a part of your syllabus. Okay, let me just introduce the whole systems approach to you first before going towards world systems theory, particularly by Wallstein. So, the systems approach became the hallmark of political science and international relations during the Cold War period. The complexities in the Cold War period such as the emergence of the technologies of mass destruction, that is atom bombs and other lethal weapons, inventions in the fields of cybernetics, computer science, etc., etc., emphasized the requirement of an integrated and comprehensive approach to address the complex problems unearthed during the Cold War period. Okay, this led to the development of the general systems theory and the application of systems approach to the various branches of natural and social sciences. So one thing to note is that the whole general system theory or the framework is not only used for social sciences or international relations, but it was very much a part of the natural sciences as well. They try to understand the system first and how it can be made better. The systems approach, in general, believes that each and every system in the universe is interconnected and they exert influence over one another. Therefore, we need to examine the dynamics of systems to understand a particular phenomenon in the universe. All right, if you want to understand the solar system, you have to first understand each and every unit. Okay, so it's the whole and there are parts of it. If you want to understand the whole, the particular phenomena, how it works, you have to understand the working of different units that makes the system. So dynamics of the system has to be understood, if and vice versa. If you want to understand how Earth moves around the other planets or moves around the sun, then you would have to understand sun, you have to move the dynamics of other planets, and then probably you would come to know how it revolves. So that's how. So they're all interconnected. Okay, so what is the concept of system within system theory? The systems approach is a framework to understand a phenomenon in terms of the wholeness of the system, its self-organization, its relationships and interactions amongst various other elements. Okay, it's very important. You cannot understand one system in isolation. You cannot understand without understanding other and its relationships with other systems and other systems, their roles. Okay, so various elements make a certain system. This approach emerged as a critique of reductionist tradition in science. It's basically emerged with natural sciences that treats the natural as well as the social world as a fragmented whole. That this is a whole, but everything is working on its own. Systems approach is exactly opposite. They say the whole is because they are together and they are interlinked. Thereby, as a fragmented whole, what happens is they look at the elements to understand phenomenon, but they don't understand the relationship. But the system approach looks at the dynamics within the system. How are they related to each other and its influence over other systems. In international relations, a systems approach is used to understand a phenomenon by examining the function of an international system, instead of analyzing the developments and happening within its elements, that is nation states. They rather want to understand how it's impacting on the other international systems. Okay. Thus, a system can be defined as an interconnected set of elements that is coherently organized in a way that achieves something. Okay. So together, when they come together, those set of elements, then together they achieve something. But when they are not together also, they share a relationship, they are interconnected, they have their own distinct function to play. That's a system. The four distinguishing features of a system are elements, interconnections, function or a purpose, and a regulating force. Okay. Now, we can take the example of our own digestive system to understand these different elements. Okay. All right. Okay. Let me quickly give you this example to understand the systems approach better. There are four distinguishing features. क्या है वो features? One is element, one is interconnections, one is function or purpose, and one is regulating force. So I'm taking an example here of our digestive system to make you understand कि ये चारों कहाँ fit होते हैं. So for example, within our digestive system we have elements. Elements क्या हुए? Such as your teeth, your enzymes, your stomach, your intestines. All these are different elements within the system. So elements in our digestive system are interconnected through the physical flow of food. All right. The function or purpose of our digestive system is to digest food. So interconnections is that they are interconnected through a physical flow of food. Okay. The function or purpose, वो क्या है? That our digestive system is to digest food and extract basic nutrients from it, and then to transfer those nutrients into another system of our body, that is through bloodstream. So our digestive system is being regulated by the chemical signals. So all of them work together, the elements being the teeth, enzyme, and different parts. Then the interconnections means that they are all connected through a single flow of food. And the function is to digest food and extract basic nutrients from it and transfer it to different system or other systems or part of our body. And how it is being regulated? The regulating force is the chemical signals. Thus, everything composed of interconnected elements has a function or a purpose driven by a regulating force that can be treated as system. So human beings are a part of a number of systems in the society, and each system is interconnected and exerts its influence over the other systems in the society. I think we will have to stop here today. We are going to continue this, and also we are going to talk about the dependency school tomorrow. And yeah, so we will continue tomorrow. Today it's time now. So I'll see you tomorrow, guys. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Vishal ji. Hello. Hello, Vishal ji.
हाँ जी मैम.
Yeah. हो गया है time?
हाँ जी.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll see you tomorrow. I'll see you tomorrow. Okay. Okay. Thank you.